2020 was supposed to be a big election year. Then a pandemic happened.
The news cycle is dominated by something else. People's lives are dominated by something else.
But you know what? You're still going to get a ballot next week, so let's dive into what's on it. That actually includes a visit from this Blazers legend. And if you were planning to, I don't know, dump a bunch of money into a political campaign, well, it looks like you might not be able to do that now, thanks to the Oregon Supreme Court. And the sports world has completely stopped, but the NFL draft is still happening. From Roger Goodell's basement.
Draft day 2020, much different than we ever imagined.
Here's the story.
Hey-o, hello, hi everybody. Hi, I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to The Story. Thank you for picking us first in your 6 o'clock news draft tonight. I promise that we won't be a bust. That said, if you think we're more of a Brian Bosworth than an Earl Thomas, please let me know. Tell us what's on your mind. Ask us your questions. Reach out using email. Find us on Instagram or Facebook, or use Twitter and the hashtag #HeyDan. All right, time now for tonight's big story. We're going to zero in on the fact that, oh yeah, I almost forgot, there is an election coming up. In fact, it's May 19th, which is in less than a month. So look, don't feel bad if you're thinking, wow, that's pretty soon. I forgot about that. For one, there is a pandemic, okay? And two, normally there are people out there trying to remind you about this. Any other time, campaign volunteers would be knocking on your door and saying, hey, I represent this candidate or this ballot measure. We'd like your vote, right? We see this all the time. Well, obviously, that is not happening right now. It can't happen right now. And that's making things very tough for anybody campaigning for anything. And time is running out to get their messages out. It's all pretty summed up pretty poignantly, I think, in our quote of the day. None of us have done this. No consultants, no campaign managers have ever run a campaign in a global pandemic. And anybody who says they have is lying. That's from Rebecca Tweed of Tweed Strategies. That last part obviously said with, I think, a bit of sarcasm, something that we can appreciate here on The Story. So what are they doing? How are they doing this? How are they campaigning, making up for this lack of the old school voter canvassing, shaking hands, kissing babies, that sort of stuff? Well, one is starting with some help from a lovable, larger-than-life, and just straight random endorsement. Here's Maggie Vespa.
Oh, hey, great to see you.
Yep, this piece on Oregon politics is kicking off with a cameo from Bill Walton, and he was true to form.
The background, how'd that happen?
The background is the mural of life. This is what I see constantly. This is where I want to be when I'm not where I am, but I am where I want to be right now, which is in Portland on KGW. What could be better? My dreams have come true.
All right, enough of the flattery, Bill. A little background here. A retired Portland Trailblazer and member of the 1977 championship team, Walton's 6'11" stature and even larger personality have made him a modern-day fan favorite. But Walton's not here to talk basketball, or even the lack of it amid the pandemic. He's here to talk about, of all things, homelessness. Walton is endorsing ballot measure 26210, a Metro homeless services tax that would rake in $250 million a year by taxing high-earning individuals and businesses that generate more than $5 million in revenue. Two big business groups have come out against it, including the Northwest Grocery Association, saying this is not the time to tax struggling businesses. Walton disagrees.
I endorse and I support everything that I believe in. I try to walk like a giant. I'm not interested in being a shriveling invertebrate. I am interested in moving things to a better place.
Okay, so let's take a beat here, because if you're thinking this seems odd, you'd be right, or at least it's pretty rare. But the campaign behind that homeless services tax is being blunt with us. They're just trying to get noticed.
The news cycle is dominated by something else. People's lives are dominated by something else.
Angela Martin runs Here Together Oregon, that group behind the tax.
If you're on the front lines in a grocery store, in a hospital, you come home at the end of the day and remembering that a ballot is sitting on the counter for you is more difficult than under normal circumstances.
Not only are voters overwhelmed with navigating life amid a pandemic, but campaigns have their hands tied when it comes to their typical tactics. They can't send staffers to your door. They can't pack rooms for debates or town halls, and don't even think about shaking hands or kissing babies. All that is off the proverbial table, leaving seasoned strategists like Jillian Shoney and Rebecca Tweed
None of us have done this.
in unfamiliar territory. territory.
You know, no consultants, no campaign managers have ever run a campaign in a global pandemic, and anybody who says they have is lying.
So what do they do? First up, this is forcing Oregon politics to go digital. We've seen that already with remote debates live streamed by the Portland City Club. The mayoral debate has gotten almost 1,300 views on our KGW YouTube page. Tweed, who's made a career running conservative campaigns like Newt Bueller's gubernatorial run, says in some cases streaming events remotely is working better.
Two of my clients represent Eastern Oregon. They represent about 36% of the state geographically. We held a town hall 2 weeks ago and had over 150 people participate. That would never have happened in person. Like, there's physically, logistically, no way to get that many people from all of those counties and those districts to show up to one event for 1 hour.
Shoney, on the other hand, runs Emerge Oregon, which recruits progressive female candidates. Among their alumni, current Oregon Labor Commissioner Val Hoyle. She says the digital focus has changed messaging. It's now about togetherness and about acknowledging our reality.
I've been trying to release some videos and get our candidates to echo a message around, you know, as we're staying home to take care of our health, please don't forget to take care of our democracy.
Then there's the benefit of going, and forgive us for this characterization, old school.
Candidates have turned to the phones, back to the phones. It's a very old technology. It's been very uplifting for candidates. They were having meaningful conversations.
Also old school, yard signs. Here Together Oregon put out a call for people to request them online. List your address, and a mask-wearing staffer will stick one in your yard, contact-free. In 1 week, they had 2,000 takers.
We're probably going to have to order more. That has never happened to me.
And if none of those methods do it for you, campaigns hope out-of-the-box moves like Bill Walton and his Mural of Life will. Because while he's not knocking on your door, he's hard to miss.
Here we go. And never forget that voting, that is the greatest form of patriotism that there is.
All right, Maggie Vespa joining us now. This is a very interesting year for any campaign, but the one thing that it kind of everyone has in their favor is the wonderful system we have here in Oregon of mail-in voting.
Exactly. And remember, this is the first year where postage is paid for on your ballot. The Oregon legislature voted that into law last year, and this is the first election since then. And so, you know, campaign strategists on all sides are hoping that, plus the fact that this is a presidential election year, will kind of mean that the voter participation and energy turnout is there. But again, we haven't been through this before. They don't really know what to expect. So they're kind of saying, we heard this multiple times, people are going to be studying this election, this turnout for a long time after this.
Absolutely. Uncharted territory for sure. Maggie Vespa, thank you.
So here's a look at what you can expect over the next month. A little timeline for you here. Voter pamphlets are going to be mailed this week. You'll need to register to vote by April 28th if you want to vote in the primary. Ballots will start going out the next day. And the actual election is May 19th. Now, we're already starting to get a lot of questions about voter pamphlets. If you have one, send them our way. Use that hashtag #HeyDan. Lori emailed us. Here's an example. We just received our voters' pamphlets, she said, for the May primary, and they are outdated and could cost the Democrats an unfair loss because of it. They still have Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren as presidential candidates. So, yes, Sanders and Warren are still listed on the ballot here in Oregon. It's not a mistake. They just dropped out of the race, of course, after they filed to be on Oregon's ballot. And this really isn't all that uncommon. And, Lori, this won't cost the Democrats anything. That's because this is just the primary, remember, so the Democrats are running against each other, not against the Republicans. Some people will probably still vote for Sanders and still vote for Warren, but Biden is the only actual candidate left in the race, so it's safe to say he is going to be the Democratic nominee. Now, we're also keeping an eye on the Portland mayor's race, and there's been a little bit of drama in that lately. It turns out a political back and forth doesn't actually stop even when there's a pandemic. So here are the details. Here's kind of what happened here. Earlier this week, the city auditor told Mayor Ted Wheeler that his campaign was violating some new election rules. Someone complained that he wasn't disclosing big donors on his campaign website and social media accounts. The auditor said he would be fined if he didn't comply and do something about that. Now, the mayor did something about that. He owned up to it and said that he would fix it. But then, in a debate, Wheeler accused all the other candidates of breaking the same rules. Well, the city auditor got involved again and said, well, that's actually not true, Mr. Mayor. Now, not every candidate broke the rules. Some of them don't have large donors or political committees, so they don't need to disclose those. And we know these aren't the end of the world kind of violations or anything, but it is good to keep our candidates in check, especially about campaign finance stuff. And speaking of political donations, we got some big news about that today. The Oregon Supreme Court just ruled that campaign contribution limits are now allowed. But there's still a lot of details that need to be worked out, so we're digging into those. But as you probably know, for years and years now, people or corporations have been able to donate however much they want to candidates on our ballots.
Oregon is one of 5 states with no limit on how much you can donate to a political campaign. So how did we get here? Let's go back to 1995. Voters passed a ballot measure capping donations at $500 for a statewide campaign, like governor or attorney general, and $100 for campaigns for state senators and representatives. It also banned corporations, labor unions, and nonprofits from donating, so only individual people could give money. Well, the Oregon Supreme Court decided that violated the state constitution. Article 1, Section 8 says, "No law shall be passed restraining the free expression of opinion or restricting the right to speak, write, or print freely on any subject whatever." The court interpreted this to mean that political donations were kind of free speech, so they shouldn't be restricted. Let's fast forward to 2006. Oregon tried again. Voters this time had to decide on 2 ballot measures. One would again put limits on campaign contributions. The other would actually change the Constitution, so this could happen. Voters passed the donation limits, but not the constitutional amendment. So the state Supreme Court said, no change, no limits. In 2016, Multnomah County voters passed their own version of campaign finance law, capping donations for candidates just in the county. Now that's been challenged and worked its way through the court system, leading us to today, when the state Supreme Court ruled campaign contribution limits are, quote, not facially invalid, meaning not automatically unconstitutional, and reopening the door to this entire conversation on a state level. And that's how we got here. Have you seen some weird-looking lights in the sky at night? Don't worry, it's not an alien invasion. 2020 hasn't gotten that bad yet. And Ramadan looks a whole lot different for Muslims in Oregon this year, now that the month-long holiday might be spent in lockdown. When the story continues.
All right, welcome back. Keep chiming in on Facebook and Twitter. Use that hashtag #HeyDan. We heard from a lot of you after Kristen Severance's story last night on being undocumented during COVID-19. A dreamer here in Portland shared her fears after President Trump's executive order pausing immigration into the U.S. for 60 days, and the future of the DACA program still being up in the air. Viewers like Marilyn wanted to know, hey, Dan, why don't the dreamers apply for citizenship so they don't have to worry about being deported? Most have been here for many years. Kristen is back now to answer that for us. Hey, Kristen.
Listen, I get this question a lot when I do immigration stories. Why don't dreamers just apply to be U.S. citizens? Okay, here's the answer. It's a long, difficult process that's just not an option for the vast majority of DACA recipients. Here's some stats for you. In 2018, more than 756,000 people became naturalized citizens. To do so, you need to be a permanent resident, a green card holder for at least 5 years. To get a green card is difficult. The most common way is to have a close family member seek permission to bring someone into the U.S. legally. That can still take years or sometimes decades to get a green card that way. Right now, according to the U.S. government, it takes 22 years for people from Mexico to get a green card if they're the married son or daughter of a U.S. citizen. And if you don't have a close family member who is a U.S. citizen, remember, dreamers were brought here as children by undocumented parents. It's nearly impossible to obtain a green card. The government also limits how many people can become naturalized citizens per country. More than 25,000 people from Mexico are allowed to immigrate legally to the U.S. 1.3 million Mexicans are on the wait list. I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, let us know. Reach out to us using the hashtag #HeyDan.
Now, here is another hardship immigrant families are facing. A lot of them are not getting federal stimulus checks. We're not talking about illegal people here. We're talking about legal citizens, legal people here. Just because you're here legally doesn't mean that you have a social security number. Instead, people use a individual taxpayer identification number to pay taxes. But listen to this. If a U.S. citizen is married to an immigrant in this category, then they file taxes jointly. they're not getting that $2,400. So here in Oregon, the Emergency Legislative Board met today to try and help some of those people out. They passed $30 million to fill some of those gaps. They met remotely, as we all do nowadays, and they voted for this big relief package. It includes $10 million for the Worker Relief Fund, which will help some people get some benefits because of their immigration status. It also passed money for small businesses who aren't getting help from the federal government, emergency housing for domestic violence victims, help for rural hospitals in Oregon, and help for renters. Tonight, thousands of Oregonians will start observing Ramadan. It's an Islamic holiday that lasts 30 days. Believers, they fast from sunrise to sunset every day. But this time around, it's going to be a lot different for our Muslim community because of this pandemic. Here's Christine Pitawanich.
Because we are all taking the appropriate precautionary measures, to comply with, the CDC guidelines. It means that in all of our locations around the country, we've stopped gathering at mosques for our services.
Harris Zafar is the national spokesperson for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, an international Islamic organization with a Portland chapter at the Rizwan Mosque in southwest Portland. He says during Ramadan, mosques host 5 prayers daily, and people often gather weekly to break their fasts, to eat dinner together.
Everyone looks forward to the social gathering. So there definitely is an overarching sadness within the community.
This year, people who would normally worship at a mosque will instead observe Ramadan at home.
We will be having nightly Zoom sessions where we could at least gather, have a reading from the Quran, and enhance, as a community, because the community aspect is very important.
In Beaverton, at the Muslim Educational Trust, things will be different as well. Wajdi Saeed, the president and co-founder, says they are trying to keep with tradition while also following health guidelines.
We maintain our 5 daily prayers in a smaller group, less than 10 people, just to keep that tradition of community, even though we pray, 10 feet apart.
Saeed says there will be a lot of sanitizing. In the time leading up to Ramadan, Saeed says volunteers have been putting together food boxes for families in need, with enough food to last 30 days.
We served almost 825 families in food boxes and support.
Some of those boxes went to Muslim families, food that will help break their daily fasts. But other recipients include families of all different faiths.
Let's forgive one another, and let's be considerate for each other, and may God bless us all.
Christine Pitawanich, KGW News.
Hey everybody, I'm Matt Safino, and you know what? There have been some really interesting things to look at in the night sky, and Oregonians have seen them with the recent clear nights, and there was another batch of them launched yesterday from Cape Canaveral. I'm talking about the SpaceX Starlink fleet of satellites, and I do mean fleet. Actually, there are several fleets. It's like an entire armada. It really is quite impressive, and I've got video for you from photographer Zach Stone, who captured these guys going over a few nights ago. First of all, there's the Milky Way. See all those straight lines kind of all together? It looks like, they actually look like they're flying in formation because they are. Now, I'm not sure which batch of, here's the launch for you too. We'll get back to the video in a minute, but this is the launch. That was the launch of the latest batch, Starlink 7, yesterday from Cape Canaveral. I'm going to go back to the video here, and you'll be able to see what I'm talking about with these guys as they stream overhead, because it really is quite impressive. Now, here's video with tall trees, and you're going to see this batch of streaks across the sky. There they go. Those are all the Starlink satellites. They're all in a row. It's kind of like a giant meteor shower, but because these were all launched together, they're low-orbiting satellites. They've been grouped together when they've been most recently launched, and they just cruise. And it's fun to see when you can see them. So, begs the question, of course, when can you see them? Well, here's when you can see them. Starlink 7, which was launched yesterday, I should say, you can see those tonight, 9:58 p.m., low in the west-northwest sky. And they should be all bunched together pretty closely because they were most recently launched. Now, Starlink 5, that was launched back in March. You can see those a little bit later tonight. They're going to be more dispersed, so the time frame there is more dispersed from 12:03 to 12:40. And then Starlink 3, you can also see those if you're up really early, 1:36 to 3:36. And again, because they've been orbiting longer, they're a little bit more spread out. You may be wondering, what is the purpose of all of these satellites? There's like 400 of them up there right now. The purpose is this: to provide internet to basically all corners of the earth. Imagine a remote area in the middle of Australia, Africa, wherever there's no internet access. Well, now there will be via satellite because of this Starlink system. So that's their goal, is to bring internet to everybody. And Dan, in this time of pandemic, that's probably a good thing.
They're going to be working hard. That is so fascinating, man. I love that. What a great bit of information. That's fun. I'd like to do a bigger piece on all of that. That's really cool. Matt, thank you. So look, I know I'm no Orlando Sanchez, but I actually have a little bit of sports news to talk to you about right now. Oregon Ducks quarterback Justin Herbert just got drafted into the NFL. He's a pro now. He got picked up by the Los Angeles Chargers, picked number 6 overall in the NFL draft. That's crazy. That's a high number. Herbert's a Eugene native, as you probably know, basically grew up in the shadow of Autzen Stadium. He started with the Ducks as a true freshman. He played all 4 years at Oregon. This guy's been good at football for a long time. And last year, he led the team to a Pac-12 championship and Rose Bowl victory. Herbert and the rest of the players, they have to watch this draft from their couches this time around, just like the rest of us. In fact, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell is hosting this entire thing from his basement. Now, there's actually some other sports news to tell you about aside from the draft, and I think it fits perfectly into our regular segment in other news or in other sports.
In other sports, can you believe this shot was 1 year ago today?
Working it down to 2-1, a deep three. Oh! What? Blazers win the series, a walk-off three from Lillard.
It sent OKC packing, sent the Blazers on to the next round of the playoffs. This look from Dame went viral. And today on Sunrise Extra, Blazers TV analyst Lamar Hurd said it was the craziest shot he's ever seen.
When you think about it, what have you seen that's crazier than that? Because to your point, Drew, nobody shoots that shot. Nobody shoots that shot willingly. Maybe the clock is winding down and you just race the ball past half court, you don't have any time, and you have to get a heat. He purposely said, I'm cool back here. I don't want to go closer. Nobody does that.
The most improbable, impossible three.
Meanwhile, 4 of the greats from 2 sports are playing golf for charity. Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning will take to the tees against Phil Mickelson and Tom Brady. They're going to raise money for coronavirus relief at an undisclosed location without spectators, possibly over Memorial Day weekend. Tom Brady laying down a hilarious burn on Twitter saying, never had much of a hard time beating the Colts or a Tiger. Also in the sports world, there's what else? Literally nothing else. And that's in other sports.
All right, we're going to read some comments when we come back and finish the story. We'll see you then. Hey, let's read some comments. Comment specifically here. Hey, Dan, that was the stupidest and worst bit of yellow journalism I've seen in a long time. You just lied through a story. Bernie has not dropped out of the race. His campaign is suspended. You dismissed him as an afterthought. You are a disgusting, ignorant reporter. Patrick Rick May. First of all, laying it on a little thick there, Rick. Second of all, I'm sorry, everybody. Bernie Sanders has suspended his campaign for at least 4 years. That's the latest edition of the story. We got the news at 6:30 coming up next. See you then.